So my name is Aaron Vandestein. I'm the chair of the Policy Committee, and I'll call this meeting to order at 7:04 p.m. But just give me a moment while I find the script for remote meetings. All right, here we go. So as a preliminary matter, this is Aaron Vandestein, the chair of the Policy Committee for the Grafton Public Library. Please permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Stephanie Teixeira.
Here.
John Babrisky.
Here.
Beth Schreiber.
Here.
Debbie Jackson.
Here.
So anticipated speakers on the agenda, please respond in the affirmative. Nancy P.
Just watching.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Thanks.
We do still need a full name and your address for our meeting minutes, Nancy.
Only if I'm participating. I'm just watching. This is Zoom. It's a public
Okay.
meeting. Thank you.
Okay.
Very good. Okay. Yeah, I think if Nancy would like to add public comment at the end, she would just need to identify herself as we do at general open meetings. So all right, I'll continue. So good evening. This open meeting of the Grafton Public Library Policy Committee is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order, which you can find posted on the town's website at www.grafton-ma.gov, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will not feature public comment. For this meeting, the Grafton Public Library Policy Committee is convening via Zoom video conference as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that some attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you and that take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All supporting material that have been provided members of this body are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless I note otherwise. We are now turning to the first item on the agenda. Before we do so, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and ensure accurate meeting minutes. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda, and after they conclude their remarks, I will go down the line of members, inviting each by name to provide any comment, questions, or motions. Our name is called further. Please remember to mute your phone or computer when you're not speaking, and please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until I yield the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in colloquy with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. Finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. All right. So now I'm turning to the first item on the agenda.
Excuse me, Aaron, sorry.
Yes.
I know Nancy said that she did not wish to speak, but just by very nature that she has the ability, I assume that we are allowing public comment. So I don't know if we need to change that. You said that we were not allowing public comment.
Yeah, that's a good point because I think the part about the document that talks about anticipated speakers, right, are really only people that are on the meeting agenda, right? And generally, I guess all public meetings would not feature public comment, but they would allow for public comment, right?
Okay, I just wanted to be clear.
Yeah. I mean, on our agenda, do we have?
We do. I
Yeah,
was just
we
about
do
to
have
show
public
that.
input.
Yeah,
Yep,
you're welcome.
yep, I see that. Absolutely. Right. So as with any open meeting, if somebody would like to participate from the public, they identify themselves and we allow for public comment. Okay. So turning to item 2 on the agenda, the new business 3D printing policy. So I've not had a lot of time to dig into this one yet. John, I think you seem to have some excitement over certainly getting this policy, implemented and approved by the board. Would you like to start with? You have the opportunity to look it over at least.
Yeah. Yep. I've read through it. I think I really just have some minor comments. And then I guess I think I'd seen Allison had some concerns just about kind of like the safety and security of it. So maybe we can talk about that as well. So I think to start with, the overall policy seems pretty good. Certain things are protected for the library in terms of like, it's at the discretion of the librarians, whether or not they want to print something. There's a whole slew of things that, will kind of need to be taken into account by the librarians kind of on the fly as these requests are submitted, I think. Someone may just download some sort of 3D model off the internet, that's fine. That's a lot of how I 3D print most of my things. But some things may not be realistically printable. So they may not be designed to be printed. And so I don't think that necessarily warrants any changes to the policy itself, but we kind of have contingencies, if you will, in the policy to say like, we can, the librarians can kind of refuse to print or reject certain print jobs. So maybe that's one of the things that kind of explicitly or kind of implicitly falls under that category. I think the explicit things, go ahead.
So John, yeah, if I could just respond to that. I think I agree with everything you're saying. If I could just, and I don't know if this goes into the policy, because you're right, it's at the discretion of the librarians to determine if something is really kind of feasible, but they're not really meant to be experts with this technology. And so if they feel that they just don't know if something's going to be feasible, and have enough education on the equipment to, make a judgment call. I think it would be nice to have a sort of resource that they can call upon, someone like yourself or somebody else who, is friendly with the library and would like to be a resource for the librarians that might say, and again, this doesn't need to come into the policy, but say, hey, the patron came to me with this project and I don't know if our equipment can even handle it. It seems kind of big, or maybe they need to break it down into several kind of chunks. What are your thoughts? And then, they can provide, some feedback to the patron. So it may not be something that they just are green lighting everything or redlining everything, but rather, working with a patron over the course of several visits, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really important, because I think as much as people may say that 3D printing is, it's, you download it and hit print and stuff like that, invariably there's just going to be things that come up where, the machine has problems overall, or just specific prints can have problems. There's just a lot of nuance to how the machine functions. It's not as much as people will say, oh, it's kind of like a laser jet printer or a laser printer or whatever they're called, inkjet printers. There's a lot more factors, and variables. The plastics can be different, even depending from color to color from the same manufacturer. The temperatures can be different. And then the way that the prints are shaped can affect how the heat is kind of distributed and things like that. So I'm sure that there will be things that come up. And while I wouldn't necessarily expect the librarians to be experts, I'm hoping, I guess, and maybe you can tell me if this is unrealistic, but I'm hoping that just by nature of doing this over time, they'll be able to hopefully recognize some things as in like, okay, that print looks like it's just going to fail because, if you try and print, I don't have one like at my desk, but I have this little thing. If you try and print something like this, like a little tiny stick standing up, it's going to fall over. There's almost no, way that that's ever going to work. If you really need this stick printed, there's other ways that you can do it. You could try and print it horizontally or at an angle or something like that. And so I think kind of over time, maybe the librarians and again, with my help or with the help of other patrons or volunteers who may be well-versed in the technology, maybe we can kind of build up like a troubleshooting guidebook or some guidelines for like a little mini training course to say like, hey, like if you see things that look like this, that may pose some problems and things like that. So I'm not sure, like we both said, I don't know if there's anything that we can add into the policy necessarily to address that. It may just be that we jump into it and provided that the other things that are more concrete that the policy does involve, as long as those things are pretty well defined, which I think they are, then we can kind of jump into it and then address the other issues as they come up. How does that sound?
Yeah. So I think we want this to be a successful endeavor for the library, right? It's something that we haven't been able to provide before. And we want to see our patrons succeed with it, right? But you know what? They may fail, and that's part of learning, right? And it's okay to fail, with this equipment as long as it's done in a safe way, right?
There will be failures.
Oh yeah.
There will be failures.
Yeah. So I guess without me just really kind of picking this policy apart, I guess, do you feel that this is there's any further changes or discussion regarding this before we bring it to the board for vote and approval?
Yeah, there was one thing that came up just before this call officially started, which I have in front of me a prop that I 3D printed on my own 3D printers. And basically it is, before I show, I'll just give a little context. It's completely non-functional. It's a design from a video game, and however, it does look kind of like a firearm. I mean, the colors are a bit crazy here, but people do crazy things with their firearms and stuff sometimes. So that doesn't necessarily mean anything. It's kind of to the point where I probably wouldn't bring it out in public, maybe on Halloween, but I could definitely see, patrons, especially, anyone into like role-playing type stuff, or cosplaying, or teenagers, again, for Halloween, things like that, wanting to print something like this. And so Stephanie brought up a good point of we shouldn't allow it. And so I appreciate you bringing that up. And so I don't feel hard pressed one way or the other. If we want to decide that something like this is not, we just want to stay away from it just to be safe, I would be fine with that. I figured I would just put this out there that kind of like individually, these parts don't necessarily resemble a firearm. So I'll show you just so there's some context. So it's called the Wingman. It's from a video game called Apex Legends. And so essentially, this is a kind of a good example because every single color is a different part. And so it printed essentially by itself on the printer. And so in a good way, if you just see these parts printing, you may not know what they're for. But I guess that could also be a bad thing. So you don't necessarily know what someone's trying to assemble. And so to the point of something that is in the policy, pretty explicitly, is objects that are unsafe. This is section 1. Yeah, right there, part B. Objects that are unsafe, harmful, dangerous, or pose an immediate threat to the safety and well-being of others. I think that I don't have data to back this up. Like I don't have, I'm not an expert on the subject, but I'm pretty sure that with a standard 3D printer like we have the library, it's you're not really able to print things like firearms that would actually function. So, you know, I won't go into details probably, but like, for example, if someone really wanted to make their own gun, 3D printing it at the library would be an awful way to go, you know, for many reasons, but specifically, you know, this is a very light plastic. I don't know if it'll come up on the camera, but it's essentially hollow. If you can see like the little triangular pattern there, it's because that's how it's filled in. It's like a honeycomb or grid pattern. So it would not stand up to any type of explosion, for example.
So John, could I have you pause or just finish your thought? And I think Stephanie wants to comment.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, go ahead, Stephanie.
Okay, so a few things, and I'm so glad that John brought this up because I have zero personal experience with 3D printers. So first of all, John, can you just hold that up for a minute?
Yeah.
Again? All right, so I think that everyone can quickly look at that and think that it could be misconstrued as like maybe a Nerf gun or a play toy or something like that. Here is the first few things. You can put it down, sorry, thank you. A few things that I just popped up. So in the policy that it's as it's written right now that we're reviewing, section 1C, as John highlighted, that item could be viewed as threatening if it was done in not multicolors. So because it's multicolored, it takes on kind of more of a playful thing. But as John also mentioned, he did that piece by piece. So I think that's something we need to consider. If someone is making a small piece and trying to assemble something at home, that's something that we should put in the online when they are placing an order to use the 3D printer. Like, what is the object being made for? Because as John just did, he said, you know, this comes from a video game, which may or may not violate section 1, part D, if it was made at the library, but also if someone made that at the library piece by piece and assembled it, and it wasn't all in colors, and then advertised that they made such an object at the Grafton Public Library through the 3D printer, I think that puts us in really unsettling waters. And so I think we need to maybe put in some more safeguards in the policy, or maybe not in the policy, but in what we have the public fill out online when they are asking to use it. I will yield the floor back. That's all I had to say on that comment.
Great. So I think the attention is on part B, right? So so there's really kind of two ways we can go about this. We can add more language that can say objects that are unsafe, harmful, dangerous, or pose immediate threat to the safety and well-being of others, including parts that can be assembled as such items, something to that effect, right? Because, you're saying objects. We're not talking about, well, I guess objects is plural, right? So object, so it could be many objects.
Well, if you don't mind,
Sure.
me adding something, Aaron. While you would not really be able to print a full firearm, you could definitely print parts for one. The non-functional aspects of it, the attachments, things like that are definitely possible. So I think that's a really good point, Stephanie, and I think we should probably update part B or add a new section about something about it. If it's part of something larger, then we probably can't print that. And so adding something to the form to say, why are you printing this essentially? And is this part of a larger object? And then to part D are you sure that this is something you are allowed to print? Then I think those would be some good changes to make.
Yep. So just as kind of Beth wrote it, and we can tweak the language if we want to, but as a patron, if I'm going to do a 3D print and I'm handed the policy and I'm looking through this and I already have it kind of set in my mind, I want to build an object like John had, perhaps, and maybe not as like a Nerf gun, but it's something that could be unsafe or that violates the policy. Assembled from parts, I'm going to stop and really think about just because of that one line about doing that project. So I think having that language, and that's a great point, is that a lot of 3D prints aren't just going to be a singular print. So I like to stick with that language, and if we want to tweak it, we can come back to it. But go ahead, Stephanie. Any further discussion?
Just on that one, because I love what we're doing with this. If we could, where John said that many things require multiple kind of individual parts 3D printed, maybe there is a section that we could put where someone would put a picture or some rendering of what their intention is to build. That way, it also gives us just one other layer of protection. And maybe not on here, but on the form that they're filling out.
Yeah. And just to clarify, I have no problem if somebody wants to build like a little video game, blaster or something that they like, or a sword or a bow and arrow, something that's, you can clearly buy off the shelf at a toy store, right? Even something like John built, it's not functioning, right? And I guess like if you built something like a Bowie knife, something like from a Rambo movie that really could injure somebody, sure, you're building a dangerous object. I don't think what John built is a dangerous object, right? And that's my thoughts. Go ahead, Stephanie.
So I do not believe that what John personally built is a dangerous object. I was less looking at C and more looking at section 1D, an object in, I'm sorry, not B, C, an item that can be viewed as threatening object. That was, so it was less about the ability to do harm and more what I was talking about was someone perceiving that it could do harm.
Okay. I don't think I have any further comment unless anybody else would like to discuss this part of the policy. I think by the end of the discussion, we should determine if this is something we want to bring to the next trustee meeting. Go ahead, Beth.
So Stephanie alluded to D as well, which is if that particular stylized weapon is something from a licensed video game or character, or, you know, you're going to print out Zelda's sword, but Nintendo sells Zelda's sword down at Stop and Shop or in Toys R Us or wherever, then we're also running into an issue of copyright violation as
Perfect.
well, which is equally as concerning.
And that's covered by D.
Yeah, yeah. So it would also like stop it right there. But I do just want to say that the police in our town are amazing, but there are instances of other communities where kids with very colorful water guns were shot by cops because they thought there was a real weapon. And I wouldn't want that on my hands, that somebody printed a fake weapon at the library that local or state enforcement felt was a threat, and it ended tragically.
Mhm. Yep, good point.
That's all.
Okay. Yeah, so I think the policy is fine how it stands for the moment, unless any further changes. Stephanie, I think you wanted to bring up a point.
I actually just have a question as to how you want to go through this, just because it's different than we had been doing. And so I don't want to
Sure.
talk out of turn. So are you intending to go kind of section by section, or I know John spoke, are you going to have me give input on the document as a whole? Just so I know how we're doing it.
Yeah, so we were kind of flying solo and going by Beth's guidance during the last meeting, and we were speaking kind of very generally about the policy. We weren't really writing policy during the meeting, but however we want to structure the format, I mean, we can if you have certainly some feedback on, since you've been on the policy committee longer than we have. Sure. What do you think?
I mean, I have feedback for different sections. That was why I didn't want to take up the time and run through them if we were going to go section by section.
No, I mean, we don't have to go section by section.
Okay.
I will say, I mean, this is a relatively short policy. I don't know how everyone else feels about it, but we could just potentially read it out loud on the call, or just go by section for specific comments.
I think I'd prefer just to skip to the parts that we want to call attention to. You know, because if there's no reason to really comment on something that we all agree on, you know, we don't really need to discuss it. So if you want to go to the next section, Stephanie, if you have another comment you'd like to add.
Yeah, so I guess I want to go up to the very first line. So section 4 highlights that it needs to be supervised. So I don't know if we want to add the word supervised to Grafton. The Grafton Public Library provides supervised access to 3D printing. I know that was something that was brought up by Allison as well. And then in section 1, if we look at E, objects estimated to take an excessive amount of time to print. Further down in the policy, we actually highlight a time of possibly 5 hours. So I would like us to explicitly say what we are considering to be an excessive amount of time, because otherwise it's up to the discretion of whoever is reviewing this. And then objects that are objects that are too large for the 3D printer's build plate. That's not something that we have the dimensions for. If they are going to be filling out a request to use online, that's again something they can't measure. So I think the dimensions of that build plate need to be added.
So can I just pause you for a moment?
Yep.
So I think that's a great point to highlight. excessive amount of time, right? So the library, it also has a set amount of time that they're open, right? So is there, and maybe it's more of a question for John, is there a way to estimate how long a 3D print can take? Is that easy to do, or?
Yeah, so there's so to give a hopefully real quick overview of the process, you essentially take a 3D model file, you load it into what they call a slicer, and the slicer slices it up. It slices it into very thin layers essentially, and instructions for the 3D printer to execute. And so the slicing software will usually try to give you an estimate about that. And so I think this is something we'll need to be, I don't think it needs to be in the policy, but I think we'll need to be a little bit conservative with it to begin with, because I feel like my slicer at least is always wrong. And if it says like, it'll take an hour, it'll take an hour and a half. If it says it'll take, 5 hours, it'll take 6. So, I think we'll have to work with the library staff during training and stuff to advise them not to start prints, exactly 5 hours before closing if the slicer says it's going to take 5 hours. Yeah, but I will say that, 3D printers are slow and they take a long time, or they can, they can be made to go a little faster, but so we'll want to start on the conservative side. Hopefully if the staff available is trained, we could start some of the prints in the morning. And then, once we hit 5 o'clock at night or something, maybe we could do really small prints, if it takes an hour, but if anything's going to come within an hour or two of closing, maybe we just have to stop that.
Thank you, John. And so my point was, in Beth, I'll allow you to speak in just a moment. So it was really, do we want to write that somewhere in the policy, that some estimations of print times should be factored into hours of operation, something to that effect. And like you said, I mean, it's really up to I think it really comes down to the librarian working with the patron to, talk about their print and say, you know what, this is going to take 4 hours. It's already, 6 o'clock. We probably should schedule this for tomorrow, and not reject the print, but just make a decision not to start it. And we, come by tomorrow at 3 o'clock, and we can start it, anytime before 5 o'clock. Go ahead, Beth, when you're ready.
Very hard to find that mute and unmute when you're screen sharing. My question was maybe connecting with the high school. I know Allison did research before she drafted this policy to look at what other public libraries do. But they also have an issue of if they have their technology class at 1 p.m, then what happens? Do you have to wait to run the print job? Do they allow it to print overnight? What kind of a setup do they have? Is it not safe to run it overnight? I actually don't know the answer to that question. If you can just leave it unattended and have it run. Because the intent of this policy, if you read through it, is not that any patrons touch this device or even the computer it's connected to. They are designing, and maybe they use the Mac or a PC laptop to do the splicing, and then they fill out the form and the staff handle it from there. I just want to make sure that was really clear. I think that's it.
Okay. So I think Stephanie is next, but was there any comment you were looking for in response to that from
No,
John?
I don't know if none of us have high school students right now. I don't think, maybe Stephanie, Stephanie's waving her hand. So maybe you do know what the 3D printer at the high school does.
Well, go ahead, Stephanie.
I don't, because my child doesn't, he goes to BVT, not Grafton, so I don't know about that. So I did read through all of policy and I do have specific comments, but I do just want to highlight, because I think a lot of them bounce off of each other, and something that we I just heard two people say is if someone comes in and they want to print, we actually have it written down that jobs, once they are emailed, will not start, for 3 days. It's section 10. So once they file, the library staff has 3 days to confirm. So nothing will be done same day as the way the policy is written right now. So if we are open to that, then I think that needs to be addressed. But because this is in here as section 10, which I had no issues with, there shouldn't be ever a time when someone's coming in saying, I want to print this by the end of the day, because we're just already kind of heading that off and saying we can't do that, because it is going to take whatever librarian is going to be, most versed in using the 3D printer, they're going to have to schedule that into their day. And so I assume that once it kind of gets rolling, that it's going to be something that maybe gets started at the beginning of a day, at the beginning of a shift, just in case there becomes problems or it's a long print. So I just wanted to highlight that because that language of someone wanting to use it same day kept coming up. Sorry, I yield the floor.
Sure. So I think we'll go with Beth and then John.
So that's a really good point. And I don't think that it's unthought of or unheard of that somebody might absolutely be able to get a same day print. But I think that this clause is definitely to manage expectations of don't expect to walk in off the street. Or, if you're talking about the workflow, maybe that we get the file and then schedule it to print in the morning. We actually only have a teen librarian 4 days out of 6 who's there in that room. And while lots of other staff could be trained, and we have an offer from somebody for training, 2 people, I think, for training, people who don't normally work in youth services might not be available either. So 3 days seems reasonable. And then we'll have to see from the volume of what comes in if it's actually doable with our current staffing, which is not enough.
John?
Yeah, so I just wanted to provide a little bit of context. I don't remember, this may have come up on a previous call or something, but the 3D printer, the way that it operates is it basically heats up plastic called the filament, and generally it's just some blend of plastic, and then squirts it out with a little tiny nozzle and makes tons and tons of layers of that. And so in order for it to do that, a lot of, at least in my experience, the plastics I've worked with, which I just use a pretty standard printer, the nozzle gets to around 200 degrees Celsius, typically for my prints. I usually do 200 to 210. And then there are, I don't think we would have the library use this material, but it is possible to even do like, again, on a standard 3D printer, 260 degrees Celsius. So 200 Celsius is 392 degrees Fahrenheit, just for context. So typically there are some protections built into the system to prevent, I think they're called like thermal runaways, or overheating, electrical failure type things. But it's still something that's getting up to 200 degrees Celsius. And the bed as well, the plate that it puts the plastic onto, you can run that at 0 degrees, so unheated room temperature. I usually run mine at 60, which is 140 degrees Fahrenheit. So it is something you probably wouldn't want to run overnight in the library, as much as that would be great, in terms of the print times. And if someone's like, oh, I want this 12-hour print to go, that's how that would happen. That's how I do it. But realistically, I would not want us to have this running in our library completely, with nobody in the building. Like in my own house, I have smoke detectors and things like that. But yeah.
So I'll yield the floor to Stephanie in just a moment. So and maybe I was thinking about this wrong, but now it's starting to coalesce in my brain, right? So if people are submitting files online and it's being reviewed, and the teen librarian, clearly this isn't their only responsibility. I mean, it almost seems like a patron, they can be present if they want to, but it kind of seems like, since they're not going to be operating anything anyways, the librarian can just kind of run it and run their project. I think kind of defeats the purpose a little bit of having ownership over the project. If you just kind of submit it and they build it, and then you show up and you pick it up on the hold shelf or something, but I almost, even though they're not able to kind of operate it, I still kind of feel like it's a, they would want kind of ownership over the project. But, so maybe it's really up to the discretion of the librarian when they want to start, running their projects. So, Stephanie.
So first of all, John, I'm so excited that you know how to use and operate this, because it's really great feedback. So when you were just speaking about those temperatures, the first thing that came to mind was the email of concern that we have from our teen library. So right now it is, it doesn't look like it can be monitored either by video or by where her desk is, if it's in operation. And I think that having something, this might be a conversation for a different day and is certainly not have to do with the policy, but maybe having it in that room is not the best space for it. Maybe having it where only the librarians can touch it behind one of the hundreds of glass walls that we have, so that all patrons can see it. But anything with that temperature that a child or a teen could accidentally put their hand in, that's concerning. So unless it is all sealed up, which I don't remember seeing, so correct me if I'm wrong, if it is completely can be sealed off from the public accessing it when it's in use. But I understand now her email, even to another level, about safety precautions.
Go ahead, John.
Okay. So I don't know too much about the specifics. I know in Allison's email, she had mentioned that we did get an enclosure for it. I'm not sure exactly what enclosure it is, but I think she was saying it's kind of a flimsy one. And so I think I'm going to guess that the purpose of that enclosure was more to contain the heat. And it does generate a lot of heat, not so much that, you don't want to stand next to it or something like that. But like, I wouldn't want to run it in my office just because it would make my office really hot over time. And I will say that the nozzle is just the thing that's moving around. It is relatively small, but I totally understand the concerns. If some kid just runs in there and starts touching things, high chance he can get burned, or she. So yeah, I think it would definitely, I think it does kind of fall outside the purview of the policy, but we would definitely want to make sure that it's kind of secured in some way. And I think that's just going to be based on the staffing and the level of comfort that the staff will have with the machine, and with kind of who comes in on a daily basis in terms of the patrons. If we have all the staff we want. Maybe it is enough to leave it behind those, what are those things called? Like the stances, I think that's what they're called. Like the thing with the little barrier where you pull the thing and hook it in, like at the bank. Like maybe that would be enough with signage and one of those things if we had full staffing. But I know we don't. So I wouldn't expect that to be an acceptable solution at this time. To the point of putting it in one of the glass cases or something like that. I'm not sure specifically where that would be, but more to the point of just putting it somewhere else. And to the point of Aaron, what you made before of it being something that's kind of out of their hands. To kind of address those two things, I think in a perfect world we could, run teen programs where we show them hands-on how to use it, right? And how all the software works, how the hardware works, maybe even have more than one so that they could have one machine that they could, kind of play with, mess with, repair, upgrade, whatever. But again, I know staffing's an issue, security of that space is an issue. So if for the time being we need to move it somewhere else so that we could at least kind of get the printing as a service up and running, I think that's a good idea. And so I kind of view it as a service that we offer to the community. If you're maybe someone who doesn't have the money for a full 3D printer, maybe you can go into one of the computers at the library and design something, and then you can submit a print job and spend $5-10 or whatever it is to print out a prototype of some product you don't want to make. I think that's that would be amazing, and I think that's kind of the opportunity that this is giving to people. And so if that's all we provide, like, ideally it would be more, but I think as a baseline, even that's a great service to offer to people. And that's all I had to say about that.
Thank you, John. Here we go. Sorry, I did see a hand from Debbie, and then just for a time check, we're at 7:50. Do we tend to work within just an hour kind of time budget, or we try to keep to an hour? Because I think last time we hit an hour and we just kind of called it and tabled this one until the next meeting.
We started, and if I can break in, we started an hour later, and it could be that we were at the library. I was at the library and it was closing at 9.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Okay.
I'm scheduled till 9. So,
Yeah, I mean, certainly, I kind of like the idea of keeping, these meetings, to an hour or so, but we can always talk later. So great, as long as we're not on a time budget. Go ahead, Debbie.
Hi, I was just wondering, I guess, from Beth. First I wanted to apologize that the notes didn't get out to you. That was all me. 2 weeks ago today, I tested positive for COVID, and it took my whole house down, and we're still coming back. So if you see me, we were coughing. I'm still working on that. I guess this is for Beth. It says in here, teen users in grades 6 through 12. And then when you go to the submitting the plans further down, it says teen patrons, and there's discussion about moving it to a different location. Is this something that is solely for the teen space? Is there like a certain teen budget? Is this, because I know people that I know in my own personal life that would be disappointed if they don't fit in the 6th to 12th grade that would want to use it as well. So I just didn't know if that was a thing, or because they're talking about safety concerns and how that is one of the staffing issues and having all the areas covered and that type of thing.
Sure. So through our building program writing and planning for the Mass Public Library Construction Program grant, Teen Makerspace was what came from the teenage clientele and the youth services librarians. And we had multiple public meetings, and you'll notice in our final plan and design, we don't even have a computer room for patrons of any age. We have laptops that we're about to deploy as opposed to like a computer lab. So my feeling is sort of, this is something the teens and the youth services librarians asked for, that the adult services staff and adults in the community did not ask for, and that we didn't secure funding and support for. So that's not to say that we can't ever have a makerspace that's for adults, but I think it's really nice to be able to have something that is special for this particular population. As far as moving it, the space wasn't designed with any special temperature control or ventilation. We did do some asking to make sure that that printer sitting in the public makerspace was okay and appropriate in terms of heat and fumes and all of that. I know that I wouldn't want something that's throwing off heat coming into my office, which does have big, beautiful windows, or into the children's program room space, or I can't think of another place in the library where you could put it and have it on display for the public. And that would then absolutely generate, well, I want to print, I'm an adult and I want to print something. And I also think that an intent of it was, while we don't provide direct school support, we do try and complement what the schools do. Grafton Public Schools had 3D printers several years ago. So, we wanted to make sure that if they can use it at school, they can use it here, that if they bring in their Apple iPad, they can print to our Xerox printers. So there's also this compatibility piece that we were trying to accomplish with the middle and high schools. I don't know if that answered your question.
Yep. And just to kind of dovetail off what Debbie said, I agree with Beth. Yeah, I didn't think this was really just for teen use, but I think it was like she said, it was intended for teen use. That doesn't mean that if adults really like the idea of it, they can bring it up to the library staff, and we can consider it for a library purchase, right? Yeah. Now, to Beth's point, where would we put another 3D printer in the building? So that would have to be put into consideration. But I think if this really takes off, and adults are giving us a lot of feedback, then we can probably make it happen. Great. So Stephanie.
I just wanted to know if I could move that we table the rest of this discussion about the safety issues and it possibly being moved, and even what age group gets to use it, because the age group is, oh, sorry, it is on here, which I missed that. But I think that at least those two things, the safety of using it where it is and possibly moving it, that's more appropriate for us to cover at a trustee meeting where it's not, we don't really have the say in that during this policy. But I can't believe I missed that the 6 to 12. I actually do not think that should be in our policy, because if it is in our policy, then we need to stick with that. I think from where it is located, and even if it stays located on the first floor, just the younger patrons are going to see it and potentially use it more. But I don't think that we should outright exclude the rest of the population. So I actually think that we should remove that for tween and teen users in grades 6 through 12. We actually also came up or faced some problems with a policy earlier this year, I believe it was, where we explicitly wrote this, that, people of a certain age were the only ones allowed to use certain spaces. And then we are also kind of forcing our patrons with maybe developmental delays or disabilities from using this, even if this is the more appropriate space for them to be in. So I really think that we should remove that language and leave it up to the librarian's discretion.
Okay, thank you, Stephanie. Any further discussion regarding changing or taking out the language about restricting to certain grades. I'm not fully against that. I guess I kind of like being explicit sometimes, because it really was requested for that space, as Beth mentioned. If you want to leave it up to the discretion of the librarian and not call it out in policy, then that's fine. It's really, like you said, up to the librarian. If I walk in there and I want to make something, it's really not for my kids, or nothing that my kids want to be involved in. Allison could say no, or the teen librarian. But to that end, I could also say that I'm helping Teddy with this project. He's in the 6th grade, and she can go, well, Aaron, Teddy really needs to be here to do that. So again, like, she kind of has that discretion, or she could say, oh yeah, yeah, I know Teddy, and sure, we can totally print that for you, right? So that's kind of leaving a little bit of wiggle room is kind of what you're thinking, Stephanie? Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm thinking. Because anything that's explicitly written in policy, we're now not giving our librarians the wiggle room, and we're really restricting them to stick to this. And I think that between them, the online form being filed, them having to review it and figure out when they have the time to do it, it also can be that if you really want to put something in there, instead of having it be restricted to those grades, you could always, in section 2, the print queue priority will be given to Grafton Public Library and card holders. And, you could put grades in there as a priority without restricting any patrons from ultimately using it.
Yeah, I think it should kind of at least hint at this isn't a teen maker space, right? Without explicitly calling. Go ahead, Beth.
So we have an unaccompanied adult policy in line with the Young Adult Library Services Association, our national organization, that encourage us to have space separated out explicitly for teenagers and barring adults entry, unless they're just coming in to browse and grab a book.
Yep.
We don't have any other space in the library to have a 3D printer except for the makerspace that was designed to hold it. So now those two things are in conflict, that you're going to be sending adults to come in and use the makerspace as adults with teenagers in the space that has been designated exclusively for them, as it is in many libraries in the country, and possibly taking that time, that space, those resources away from the intended age group, which doesn't sit well with me.
Yeah, so the unattended adult policy really talks about that an adult can't be in an age. I'm going to screw this up, in an age like designated space, like the teen space, without the teens present, right?
Yeah.
So really, kind of what you mentioned is, if I wanted to go work on a project with my son on the 3D printer, that would still be okay.
Together, yes.
Right. Because you're not saying that, oh, well, he's got to kind of own the whole thing and work directly with the librarian. And some kids really aren't capable of that, or still kind of want their parent with them. Okay. Stephanie.
Devil's advocate. From this whole, our discussion so far, every time we come back to it, the teens aren't actually using the 3D printer. They are requesting it online
Mhm.
for an adult librarian to operate. So we don't need to say that adult patrons cannot use it, because whether or don't have the ability to request it online, because they would not be in that space operating the machine anyways, it would still be the librarian. So I do not feel that it is in conflict with the unattended adult policy at all. There are many computers that they would be able to access this, and where they're not using it, they don't need to be in that room.
Fair enough, point taken. I will say, though, that while I can offer the training to all staff, and maybe even make it mandatory for all staff, like at some point when push comes to shove, I have less than 60 hours of young adult services librarians to manage all of the things for the middle and high school age group. And then to add an additional duty either for the teen librarian to print adult projects, or for the adult staff to now take on yet another brand new thing when morale is very bad and we are pressed very thin to accomplish even our basic day-to-day tasks. It's just a hard pill to swallow. And it might very likely come down to, if you don't do this, I'm writing you up. Which I really don't want to go down that road with my staff.
Yeah, so again, I think that I'm sorry, Erin, can I respond?
Yeah, colloquy is fine. It says so in the remote meeting guidelines.
Oh, this is colloquy. Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I do not want to put more stress on the staff. I also think that we need to be as liberal with who we are including
Gotcha.
when we're writing policy. And so it is up to, I mean, we say it a few times, the library staff to say that they can't do it for whatever reason. And the whatever reason could be that there's just not time to fit it in that week. And so I think that if it becomes a pattern where certain librarians just refuse to do it, then that might spark a conversation about accessibility to library services to everyone. But I want to lean more liberal to who's included in using all the library services in a way that is safe for all of the patrons, and keeping that in mind, and letting the librarians kind of manage their time without placing the expectation that you have to do this. But if you have the time, you have, will have a list of every request. And is that something that can fit in the schedule? I do not think that everything's going to fit in the schedule. And we will see how often this ends up being used once it's up and functioning. So I guess it's less about dictating what the librarians have to do and more giving them the autonomy to say, I can fit this into my schedule while servicing as many patrons as possible.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and Stephanie, to your point, section 1, I think speaks to that, right? The library reserves the right to refuse the production of any content at any time at the discretion of the library staff, right? So
Yes.
I'm gonna refuse to make your lucky cat figurine, just because we're running a lot of programs this week, and we don't have it time in the schedule to run the 3D printer, right? So the library reserves the right to refuse the production of any content at any time at the discretion of library staff. Perfect.
Okay.
I saw another hand. Demi?
Yeah, I don't know if this is going to, hi Beth, go over well.
I know what you're going to say. Go ahead.
You do?
I think
Okay.
so. Go ahead.
Let me know. There is a small counter outside of the borrower services office by the copy machine. Is that a location that could possibly host the 3D printer because the circ desk up there is never left unattended. So if there's a long print job that's going, you know that their children are not usually up there. They're definitely not up there unattended. Teens, when they typically come up the stairs, the librarians are like on alert as to like, why are the teens up here? And that's just, it's sort of a secure-ish area right now. It's just literally just where the stapler and like a paper cutter and some tape is. So that it's something to think about as far as staffing. I might make some people mad if it moves up there, but it was just an idea.
What if we had, now I'm going to be devil's advocate. I do have someone who said the one you have is really complicated. I have an easier one. I'll donate it and I'll come and run staff training. So we could have two, one down and one up. My intent for those counters had always been to keep them as clear as possible. So people doing major print jobs could spread out. But all of my efforts to keep them clear, they keep getting cluttered. So maybe a printer sitting right there or taking one of the two laptop counters and designating one as the printer and one for laptops would be a possibility.
I love that idea, honestly. And
Okay.
thinking about libraries that have 3D printers, I only go to the Grafton Public Library. I'm a groupie, I've admitted. But I do recall in Shrewsbury, I think, that they have one. It might even be behind glass, kind of right as you walk in. And this was a while ago. I think I was there from an MLTA meeting. But right along the wall, it's just kind of run in 3D prints. It's really kind of a great attraction for the library to kind of walk in and just kind of watch it being built. I'm not really interested in 3D printers or building anything of my own, but I love to kind of just watch it happen. So if we can make that happen and maybe at least put a second 3D printer, I think that would be awesome. And, if a patron is willing to donate equipment and time, we love that. In regards to this policy, I'm sorry, did anybody else have a hand up? I think as long as it doesn't specifically pigeonhole a librarian into doing not having any flexibility. I think the policy looks pretty good, and I see you kind of going through that. So I feel better about this policy as it stands. Is the next step, I guess, to go to legal. Okay, great. So I saw Debbie and then Stephanie.
I just had a question about, because part of my job is budgets and numbers and things. Being realistic on the cost of a print job being $3 for an hour and $1 for each additional hour, I can see it getting beyond us and having to find money to buy more things later on. I just didn't know. I don't do 3D printing, so I don't know what those costs are typically.
Okay.
Debbie, that was also on my list.
Yeah.
Okay. John, are you going to respond to that?
Yeah. I don't know the specifics off the top of my head. I will say 1 kilogram of filament is roughly $20 to $30 typically. And like I said, printing is slow. So maybe I can look up some things about that. Another factor is that, again, we're heating up something really hot. So electricity usage is, I wouldn't say a concern, but a factor. So I can try and look up some numbers on that. I know I've seen some like videos about like the true cost of 3D printing, because it's not necessarily just the filament. I think my guess is that those dollar amounts there would cover the filament, because you're not going through a kilogram of filament in in an hour or even a day, really. I don't think. So I think that would cover it. But it might be good to have some hard numbers around that, just for our own edification, and just to be sure it's not gonna, drive the electric bill up to untenable levels. So
Great. Any further discussion? Go ahead, Stephanie.
Sorry, I don't have further discussion on that, but before we send this to legal, I have a few more things.
Yeah, that's why I'm any further discussion on the policy, because we're at 8:15. And I think we have an option for public comment on the agenda, which, we have a few people visiting. I'm not sure if they want to comment. And then I think that's it, right? Then we adjourn. I think that's the last item. Okay. So Stephanie, sure, go ahead.
So these should be faster than the first section. All right, so yes, I wanted to know the cost. I think that we should, when we're figuring out those numbers, we should factor on the higher end than the lower end, especially if we're not requiring any payment until pickup for those jobs that are left. The library can't be expected to absorb all those extra things. So thanks, John, for that. I didn't know. Okay, so on 9, I don't believe that 9 and 11 really need to be separate. When we are confirming the cost, setting up a pickup deadline, estimating that payment, those really can be combined. So I think just combining number 9 and number 11. Number 12, it says printed items are to be picked up within 14 days. Failure to pick up a printed object within this period will result in the cost being invoiced to the patron and a block placed on the library account as well as let fee, blah, blah, blah. So number 2 in the policy says that priority will be given to cardholders and such. Are we requiring that you are a library card holder to use the printer? Because I think that we need to be explicit on that. Are we just giving preference, or do you have to be a library card holder? If you don't, how are you proposing being able to place a block on a library account that doesn't exist?
Yeah.
I can go on, but if anyone can answer that.
Well, just to bounce off of what you said, Stephanie, I think that's great. A great point. And to that end, is there any way to identify a person, right? You can identify someone by their library card, library account. And so if they aren't, a library card holder and they're not identifying what, their account information, is there other ways to identify that person, right? Because, again, a lot of what's being printed is always up to the librarians, consideration. And if they feel something's offensive, they just reject it, right? You're not printing anything that could be illegal, under the librarian's nose. So you wouldn't have to bring it to the attention of the authorities if there was something, offensive. But again, I think identifying somebody, at least by their library card, is important to do. We call that out in the policy.
Okay, so I think that we need to then add the language that you have to be a Grafton Library card holder, and then in section 2, priority will be given to library card holders. That can be taken out because you have to be one to use it. That way, then section 12 will make sense.
Yeah.
And
But before you move on, Beth.
I'm happy to make that change, but I do want to call attention that we actually don't require a library card for any other technology use at this time. That's not to say that it might not eventually change if we have a different method of, like, you'll need one to check out a laptop, but you don't need one to just sit on a PC. So that could be perceived as a barrier, but I don't have a good workaround or solution for how to recoup that money if the person bails and doesn't pay for it. You might be able to require their name and address and mail them an invoice, but you still might never see that money.
well, we're not I'm sorry, I can't remember. I don't have the technology one in front of me. We're not allowing them to leave the library with, say, a laptop, are we?
No, it's in-house use only.
So then, so I think that that would be what's different. There's not a potential cost for us. And when I used when I just went, I needed to use a hotspot because the room I was in didn't have enough. And I was required to present my library card or my ID to get that. So they are holding on to something if you are requesting use of like that technology, where this is something that is essentially you could order from your house. If someone had the argument about it placing a barrier, you don't actually have to be in-house to use it. So this is how we could recoup any potential losses.
Okay.
Yep. You know, just to dovetail off what Beth said too, you know, people are able to use our copiers off the street, right? And it's not really the same thing, but it could be perceived as such, right? I can use a paper printer. I can't use a 3D printer without identifying myself or, you know, having a library card account. But, you know, let me ask you this question. If I go in and I print, you know, a 50-page document and I don't want to pay for it, you don't have to give it to me.
Well, you can grab it and run like heck out the
Sure.
door, right? Because
Sure.
as actually currently we don't have it set up so that either you have to pay in advance to get your prints. We tried that and the system did not work for us. Or even that your print job stops until you enter a code. We have that ability, but haven't implemented it. So you send it to the printer and it prints, and then you can go pick it up and rifle through whatever else is there and walk away without paying for it if we're not right at the desk keeping an eye on it.
Yeah,
Which
I mean,
we don't.
yeah, I mean, what I'm saying is like, you know, the teen librarian, you know, prints something for me and it's ready, and I want it, and I don't want to pay for it. They don't have to give it to me.
That is true.
The other piece to this is interesting. What if my print job comes out so crappy I don't want it? So I don't want to pay for it. You know, I don't want to pay $7 for something that looks like a pile of slag, you know, because my print failed. You know, that's because John said you're going to fail a lot, right? How many failed print jobs am I going to pay for? Go ahead, Stephanie.
So a couple of things with that. I would consider a failed print job to be the same as if you got a page that was like half inked or had like a giant line through it.
Yeah.
It's not usable. So that would be not the responsibility of the patron. The other thing that I want to be respectful of is the librarian's time, not only to train, but to use the machine, to check on the machine. All of that is going to be time away from other commitments at the library. To use a printer probably takes them all of 30 seconds to set it up, send it, and maybe collect money, where especially as we're implementing this, it could take a great degree of time longer for the librarians. And I think that compensating the library for this investment of time as well as the resources is one of the reasons that that I'm looking at this 3D printer differently than printing off paper. That's my argument.
Okay. So any further discussion about, because, you know, if a failed print job, you know, something doesn't come out I guess if it doesn't come out the way you like it, that's a different story. But like something that fails, you know, I guess it's really up to the librarian and the patron to kind of really think about what it is they're printing, and you know, it could just be with practice, the librarians get better at identifying stuff that's probably going to fail. Like John said earlier, you know, like if it looks like a stick, librarian goes, cool, let's print it. Oh, you know what? I guess sticks don't really print that well anymore. Next time I see one, we probably shouldn't do a stick, you know. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, so I think that's a really important aspect. Is I think there will be a learning curve to it. You know, I'm at the point where I can usually identify generally things up front where I'm like that, you know, I'm not even going to try to print that because I know it's not going to go well. Things like printing a pencil vertically, again, that example is a classic one. And so, yeah, so I think it's something that there will be failures, but that's kind of just the nature of the technology right now. And like I said, it'll get better over time. In terms of the policy and failures, I don't know if we need to add something specific. Maybe this would fall under the discretion aspect, where it's like the librarian says, I tried to print it twice. You know, we burned 2 hours on each attempt and then it failed. Usually there's like catastrophic failures, you know, in terms of like the thing fell off and there's no recovery, right? There's also failures where it's like, well, you know, I was printing this little model of a figure you made and the guy's arm fell off. You know, maybe that's something where again, it's maybe just the librarian's discretion. I'm not sure how rigid we want to be with that. You know, there could be a case made, well, it did print, but it fell off. So maybe you can just glue it back on rather than us kind of burning more resources doing it. Or again, if something fails more than once and it doesn't, and maybe the librarian doesn't know how to handle it, especially in the beginning, then we can just kind of, unfortunately, just the nature of it, kick it back to the patron and say, hey, we tried printing this, it failed, we couldn't do it, so we're going to have to pass on it now. Or maybe they can reach out to, again, one of the volunteers or someone who's able to come in and help them with that to make sure it would print correctly. There are tons of things you can do to like make things print better, which are like supports and things. And then I'll throw in something real quick, which is, I'm guessing Allison, I think she's the one who originally drafted this policy, right? The costs look pretty good, just of my experience with it and just a real quick bit of research I just did. I want to say it's something probably roughly like 50 cents an hour in terms of like the filament cost. And then you add in the electricity on top of that. So I think we kind of front load it there a little bit with the $3 for the first hour kind of thing, just because, you know, again, there's some time to kind of, you know, get things set up and just, you know, look at the part, make sure it's going to print and all that. So I think roughly that is a pretty good cost, but I'll just double check, look around some more and make sure that it is.
So, you know, there's a lot of ambiguity, like John said, about things failing and being successful. And, you know, you could print something and the arm fell off. I don't want to pay for that. You know, like it's kind of, I don't know that that's a situation we really want librarians to be in, those sort of conversations with patrons. You know, again, I think it should be up to the discretion of the librarian, you know, just to say, you know, you're right. Let's try it again in a different way. And like Stephanie said, they shouldn't have to pay for it. I don't think this is going to be a profit center for the library. I think, you know, with the amount of failed jobs, it's certainly going to, you know, cost more, and you're not going to really probably have more failed jobs than you're actually getting paid for. But what about, like John said, it's only about $20 or so, you know, for a kilogram, and that'll probably get you 10 to 12, you know, small models maybe. I mean, is this really going to be a huge cost for the library? I think you can probably exploit it right? Especially if you're opening it up to people just have massive free use of a 3D printer. They could just be burning through it, and nobody else could get time. Like if somebody's a real enthusiast, they could just be ripping through it. So I don't know. It seems like Beth was kind of shaking her head. This is going to be a huge cost if we don't charge patrons for it. But anybody would like to respond to that?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Beth.
It's not so much that it's going to be a huge cost. It's that our program budget this year is $0, as are many other lines that we just had to annihilate from our budget, from the municipal budget, to support the additional size of the building and some extra staffing. So the intent was, we can reduce the cost or have it just a flat $1 an hour, but to recoup some of that, we have basically a revolving account for library materials. So the idea is we take in money for that printing, it goes into the revolving account, and we use that to pay for the copier lease, the toner, the paper, the 3D filament, as well as some things that we sell to the public, headphones or earbuds or flash drives. And we have a tiny upcharge just so that we can have a little bit of extra money in that account for unanticipated expenses. So we're not going to get rich. We're really not going to cover the cost of either staff time or, say, the electric bill, which I think is fine. We really just want to recoup the cost of the filament. And when you have a $0 program budget and I go to my staff and say, now you have to find an extra however many $100,000 for the year to add different colored filaments for not one, but now 2 3D printers mid-budget cycle, that's a challenge.
Okay, thank you.
I'm happy to, because we have some, offer like the first print for free, or decide we're going to do free printing for a year. So people have a time to test it and play around with it and make mistakes. And I also wanted to say that I do think we err on the side of generosity toward our patrons for, oh, that wasn't what you wanted. It was too many pages. It came out funny. Oh, that came out weird. Don't worry about it. And that's because we charge a little bit more than the cost that it actually costs to run even a paper print job. That we sort of have a little bit of discretion to do that.
Okay. So I know when I was talking, I saw like 3 hands go up. I think what would be probably a little bit easier, and especially so you don't have to keep your hand up the whole time, because it is a little distracting when you're trying to talk and somebody's like, me, right? So if there's that button, I think we could use the button. In that way, I don't have to always be staring at the cameras when I'm talking. So I think I saw John, and then I think it was Beth, John, Stephanie. So if you want to go John and then Stephanie, I see her hand there. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll try and be quick. I didn't realize I had looked for that raise hand button and I didn't realize it's under the reactions button. So
Okay.
yeah. So what I was going to say is I want to say, again, we'll have to look at the specifics of the electricity cost, but I want to say that the $3 for the first hour and the $1 thereafter, I think that will kind of hopefully at least break even. I don't think it will be a cost center, and I would also encourage us to say again, if the print fails twice or something like that, and I think this will be just a matter of training, then we'll just say, sorry, we can't do it, or we'll have to bring in someone else to make sure we get it right on the 3rd try, something like that. And don't charge them for the failed prints. So, try and be friendly about that. I think that'll be helpful. And then we can go back, I think, and analyze the costs and see what it actually costs us to run this. And see if if we are able to either recoup some costs, or maybe it's something where it's free for teens certain times of the year, but adults normally have to pay, something like that. Just an idea.
Yep. And just to comment on what John just said, honestly, you know what, this is actually a different topic, but it's still about cost. So I'm going to let Stephanie talk, and then I want to call out something regarding charging someone when they don't pick it up. Go ahead, Stephanie.
So I forget why I originally raised my hand when you were speaking, but I I know John said that like a filament is usually like $20 to $30. I just quickly Googled and it seems to be that like 1.5 of filaments, according to the last couple months, that these websites that I'm seeing can run $45 to $70. So I think that the cost, maybe we can do some research and bring that up when we bring it to the board meeting, because that would be a significant difference. So I don't know where Beth would be able to get the filaments from. So if we could have that cost directly from where you are able to get it from. And then what I can also do is, I know there's some schools and libraries around in the area that have it. I don't know if they have those figures, but I'd be willing to call them and see if they could give us a roundabout price of what they feel that it costs. And it might help us with our discussion. And then we can always reevaluate like 6 months after it's been up and running for that portion.
Yeah, I was going to just say the same thing. Like this policy isn't meant to be perfect. We're going to try to, have a best put our best foot forward with this. But there's going to be some things that just maybe don't work and we reevaluate. So, and that's what we do with all our policy. I would like to say that the point about, charging someone for the print and putting a hold on their card, I think is fine. But then saying the object will be discarded is like, it's really kind of harsh, because you're still charging them for it, right? You don't have to call that out specifically, but I guess like if the librarian wants to throw it out because it's just sitting there forever, they don't want to like have a drawer full of all these prints. They're not required to hold on to it. So I don't know if you want to say it in that way. If there's a way to say that, it may be discarded. Yeah, an object may be discarded. I love that. No, I mean, you don't even have to put a time frame in there. I would say an object may be discarded, right? Because, I go in there and I say, you know what, I want to start using services again. Here's the $6 of the print. Do you happen to still have it? Oh yeah, I've got it right here, Aaron, So, great. Maybe discard is perfect.
The maximum we're talking about here in the context of what we have is $8, just for reference.
Yep. Okay. Where's that button, Beth? She doesn't need a button. She's got a hand. No, go ahead. The floor is yours.
I'm sorry, again, because I'm screen sharing, the menu is different. I do not have a reactions button. It maybe it's by my name. Oh, you know what? I bet if I click. Yeah, I don't even have raise hand when I click my name. I'm sorry. And now I forget what I was going to say. So
we were talking about maybe discarded.
Oh yeah, along the lines of being harsh, like it may actually be harsh to block the library card. Like I would also be willing to let that go. Like you can still use your card, because if we're talking $8, that's not a $10 fine. So we would only block the card, I think, if it got to an excessive fee. So I actually might be more comfortable leaving that out and, not, again, in the interest of reducing barriers, right?
Sure. So result in the cost being invoiced to the patron.
Yeah. Yeah, we can still put it on their card so they can pay it. What I don't want to happen is they won't put it on the card and then they go online to CW Mars and pay, because there's no other way to pay if you have a credit card, right? But then what happens is the fees they collect, we put into the ebook collection. So we never then recoup the cost for like the wire. So as long as there's like again, enough of a surcharge on the cost to recoup some loss, I think it'll be okay.
I'm with Beth. I rather not have the library card blocked so that patrons can still use the library and the electronic materials. If we were going to block anything, I would want it to block their ability to print again. like with the 3D printer, and just kind of maybe put a block on that, especially if it's habitual instead of all the services that the library has.
Okay.
Or remove the language altogether.
We could say like repeated failure to pick up and pay for items may result in loss of privilege.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, yeah. Well, it almost wrote that sentence for you. That was kind of cool.
Creepy. Robotic words.
Okay, great. Any further discussion? Oh, Stephanie's got a hand.
This is my last thing. So number 14. Well, I don't know if it's still 14 now. It's the last one. By using the 3D printer, the patron assumes all responsibility for blah blah blah. That one, yes. Is this policy linked to the submission of or the request form? Just because then by submitting, you can say by submitting this form, you're agreeing that you're abiding by the library's policy regarding 3D printing to the best of your knowledge. And it's just, if it's not linked to that, or it's not visible on that, and we're saying, well, we have it posted, again, somebody doesn't have to come into the library to use it. So we want to protect ourselves while keeping accessibility. So if we can just link this whole thing so that submission acts as a signature, kind of. And that was my last thing.
Okay, thank you. So no additional adds to the policy, right? Okay. So this last section at the bottom, Beth, if you could scroll just a bit more, it says compiled and voted by the Board of Library Trustees. And I'm new to policy committee. So is this language on all of our policies? Yeah. Well, it's compiled by some library trustees, policy committee. I don't think generally has to be all library trustees. In fact, I feel that committees can really consist of anything on behalf of the library board. You could say compiled on behalf of the library board of trustees, right? Something to that effect. It's just we don't have to change it tonight, but
if you're going to change it, I would specifically say that the board's policy committee compiled it and then it was voted by library trustees. The reason that it was written, compiled, and voted by library trustees, at least from my knowledge since I've been on the subcommittee, is that we talked about it, wrote it, but then ultimately it would go in front of the full board for their discussion and input, and then voted on. And so a lot of times people would have feedback at that point. And so the full board still has really control over the language because they could just nix it. But I think that was why we did in the past, but I have no problem adding this.
yeah. I mean, do we even have to call it out? Who compiled it? Is that important? I mean, maybe it is, but I just feel like the Board of Library Trustees doesn't necessarily have to be the ones to compile it, but then also saying compiled on behalf of the library trustees also says, well, the library trustees didn't have any hand in writing this policy, so that doesn't sound great either. Go ahead, Beth.
I think we could actually just leave it at adopted by the Board of Library Trustees, and then the date that we voted on it would be enough.
Love that.
And go, as we revise and
Yeah.
review policy, we'll just change them all. I don't remember where or when this started showing up.
Okay.
Sounds
Yeah,
good.
I like that. Great. So with no further discussion, I'd like to move on to the next item on the agenda. So Beth, you can stop sharing if you'd like, and you can get back to your reactions button. So let's see, the next one is public input. Do we have any input regarding the 3D printing policy from the public? Great. So hearing none, I will move on to the next item on the agenda, which is setting our next meeting. I think, Stephanie, I don't know if you had an opportunity to chime in, but during our last meeting, we thought Wednesdays at 7 o'clock seemed to work for most people. I mean, the only thing that we're missing on Wednesdays is music on the common. So that would have been kind of fun. But go ahead, Beth.
I'm missing ukulele, which I'm supposed to shepherd on the second Wednesday of the month, which I totally forgot about when I was like, we should have every other week. It's either policy committee or board of trustees. So the second does not actually work, at the first or third would.
Yeah, so we don't have to be we should be try to strive to have a set date. But you know, we really want to make sure that we're not really impacting too many of the subcommittees members schedules. So we'll next Wednesday, not next Wednesday, when would be the next proposed meeting, Beth? Where we discussed the last time?
Well, it would be the 14th of September, but I'm not available.
Yeah.
So either the 7th, which is following Labor Day weekend, or the 21st. I would also be double checking because high holidays start at the end of September. So off the top of my head, like I don't have a calendar.
Can I make a suggestion?
Sure.
Yeah.
So the board, we're the third Wednesday, right?
4th.
We're the fourth Wednesday.
Yeah.
So then I would suggest that the policy committee is the first Wednesday. The reason being, we're fresh off of any feedback from the board meeting, but it also gives us a week it gives us two weeks to get any more information that we discussed. Like right now, the cost to have that feedback for when we bring it to the full board.
Yeah, so are you proposing that we meet a week after the trustee meeting?
Yeah, the Wednesdays after the full board meeting.
Yeah, so I mean, this month is a little weird because our board meeting is on the 24th and then the next Wednesday's the 31st. So it's not really the first Wednesday of the month.
Well, just the Wednesday after.
You're just saying Wednesday after.
Yeah. just the
I
Wednesday
think we
after.
wanted to have two meetings every month of policy committee, right? Not just one. Oh, just one meeting. Yeah.
So
Oh,
when-
okay.
last year when we were going through a lot of them, we would do 2 sometimes a month, but we had a time, like a stop.
Yeah.
So like we've gone for almost 2 hours, but we used to, if we were going to do it for 45 minutes or an hour, and then like we just stopped, that's what we got done, and we would pick it up later. So I think that we need to either choose that we're going to run through an entire agenda with a meeting, or if we're going to do it multiple times a month, that there's a hard stop and we pick it up the next time, just to respect people's time.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so let's set the next meeting for August 31st. Let's think of May because there's 31 days in May. So August 31st. Does that sound reasonable? Wednesday, August 31st, 7 p.m.?
Yeah.
Okay, Very good. Let's see. So I have adjournment, but before we adjourn, I will just to follow up on our last meeting. The Disability Commission, I think they mentioned the policy, the unattended adult policy at their meeting, because we had talked about how it was still on their agenda. They just hadn't discussed it. So I think they discussed it, and they mentioned that either we should attend their meetings or vice versa, they should attend one of our meetings. So I reached out to Roger Trahan Jr. I think he's still part of that committee, if not, but I haven't heard back yet. So I'm hoping that, to hear back from him soon, and, we can put someone from their group on our Board of Trustees agenda or vice versa. Because I think they want to have some input or discussion. So I'll work that out. It's in the works. So I just want to update you guys on that. Okay, great. So with no further discussion, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Great. Motion made. Any second?
I'll second.
All right, motion made and second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? Beth?
Aye.
Aaron, aye. John?
Aye. John, aye.
Debbie?
Debbie, I.
And Stephanie.
Stephanie, aye.
Very good. I declare the motion carried.